Hello and welcome back to the Keenan Briggs podcast, where I talk about track and field, sports, and just ways to help our community improve, get better, enhance our abilities, all the good stuff. It's been really fun so far with this podcast, mainly because I just ramble and talk for 15, 20, 35 minutes and no editing. I just talk and I leave it there. I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors, which are nobody. So if you do want to be a sponsor of this, please let me know by sending me an email at info@keenanbriggs.com, and we'll go from there. Now, right into it. The podcast today is about spoiled athletes. I think this is the topic that many people want to hear, many people want to talk about, a lot of concern. There are a lot of families that talk about the generation now that we're dealing with, where these kids are just simply entitled. Now, I think entitlement is actually a good thing in some aspects because it helps build character, things like that. But today's focus will be spoiled athletes, and I'm going to talk about a lot of those specific details. Now, the overview, I'm going to be talking about what my definition of a spoiled athlete is. I'm going to talk about club sports, the pros and cons of them, how they're helping and actually making things worse. I'm going to talk about the social media impact. How important is social media and the roles that it plays onto our children, and also provide solutions. That's my main focus, is whatever topic I talk about, I want to make sure that I add in solutions, because it's all great to talk about the problems we have, but if we don't have a solution in line, then we're just talking in circles. All right, so first thing is I looked up what spoiled meant through Google, and the first definition is to diminish or destroy the value or quality of. The second definition is harm the character of, in parentheses, a child by being too lenient or indulgent. Now, my definition of spoiled is very consistent with this, and it actually combines both. When you spoil an athlete or a child, you're in a sense diminishing their value. You're diminishing their perception of what value is. And it's harming that child, because when you're being too lenient or too indulgent, it's causing issues. Now, again, I'm going to first put this out there. I'm not a parent. I want to be one day, but as of today, I'm not. And so I do understand that my point of views are going to be from a certain side of the spectrum. However, I feel that I'm closer to the parent side only because I've spent the last 12 years literally coaching kids, your athletes that are the age of the kids you have. If it's your first time with athletes or kids this age, I have had athletes from the ages of 10 to 17 every single year. And I've been able to put together programs, things like that. So, in a sense, I feel that I do have some credibility. But again, I do understand that I'm not a parent. So, a lot of things that I'm saying may change the second that parenthood comes into play. But until then, this is how I feel. Now, when it comes to sports, many times, when I talk to parents, their kid is the best. They've ran the fastest times in the 100. They're the best athlete on the team. All those things. It's great. Their kids deserve to be praised. Their kids deserve to be honored and respected. All these things. However, when you listen as a sports professional or a coach, you hear all these accolades. That's great. Let me see this child. Let me see them move. Let me assess them. And then once the coach or a professional assesses that athlete, they can tell you what level of success this kid's going to be able to get to, or where they are currently, or whatever. Again, you always want to go with a second, third, fourth, 1800th opinion, because you can't just go with one, because one coach may just be in a bad mood and say your kid isn't tall enough, and that's it. Um, but basically, the focus is to try to find a balance. You want to make sure you're giving your athlete whatever they need. However, them understanding it has to be a process. There needs to be a strategy that gets them to this point. Having them understand that whole structure is great, because that's going to help instill the seed, or put the seed down for when they get to high school, middle school, college, pro. There's always a structure that's set in, and it takes time to get from point A to point B. Now, there's a difference between rewarding your athlete and promoting your athlete. When you reward an athlete, you're rewarding them for the hard work put in. It's rewarding them for a finished task. It's, I need you to run this many runs. When you finish, you get a high five. All right? Or when you finish, you're going to see some type of improvement. Or, when you finish this season and we focus on these specific details, you're going to see a reward at the end of the season. Now, when it comes to promoting, many times athletes get promoted to the next level. For example, I coach at Mater Dei, and I didn't know until I started coaching at Mater Dei that you don't just get put on varsity. There were seniors on JV. And the reason for it is because they weren't putting up varsity numbers. Very simple. But I grew up thinking that when you're a senior, you're on varsity. If you're a junior, you're on JV. If you're a freshman or sophomore, you're on frost off. If you're good, you play up. But you always get bumped up to the whatever level you're supposed to be at. That's not true. So when we are just promoting athletes just up a level, we have to make sure that we're rewarding the athletes versus just promoting them, because they're going to expect to be promoted all their life. And then now all of a sudden, they're going to expect to just be promoted to college when you're not a college athlete. Maybe you're not a Division I athlete. Maybe you're not a Division II athlete. Whatever it may be, that's not where you are. So you can't expect these kids to just be promoted to pro. And so it's very important that at a very young age we teach these athletes the difference between promotion and rewards. Now, they may be perceived the same because they're receiving more stuff. However, there's a big difference when it comes between rewards and promotions. Now, when it comes to the topic of club sports, club sports are something that is fairly newer, I guess. I guess it's newer for this new generation. I'm 34, and I only had recreation city basketball, then I only had NJB. Those were the only two different sports that I was involved with. NJB was simply just too expensive. It cost more. There was more travel games. They practiced more often. They typically practice indoors. I played basketball outdoors. I paid, I believe it was like 20, maybe $50 for the whole season. I got a t-shirt, and I played basketball outside every Saturday. Those were my games. That's how I played. Now, this new generation, they have multiple teams. You go to Vegas and you see hundreds of teams show up with the best jerseys and all these things. It's good. It's an experience that I never had, that these kids get to have. But there are pros and there are cons when it comes to this overall situation. Let's first start with the pros. So the pros is the kids get the kids get more opportunity to play the sport, which is always good. Getting the experience of reps in game, practice. These are always good. I know a lot of teams and families that play for multiple teams. The other great thing is that there's multiple tiers of competition. So before it was NJB, then there was recreation basketball. Now you have travel ball teams, you have club teams, you have city teams, you have all these other levels. Even within the club teams, kids can play up ages, they can go down ages depending on the actual sport. All these things are great because if you're not as good as that top tier level, there's a top tier A division. There's a top tier B division. And you get all these levels of play, which helps the athlete develop and get better, and it's a great thing. Then there's another value, and this value is of being simply wanted. I got phone calls when I was a kid, mainly because when they drafted out of the pool of athletes, the coach would tell my mom, "Hey, we want your son on our team." But it was two or three coaches, that were in the same bubble and they're pulling from the same pool. But now you have parents and coaches that are saying, "Hey, I saw you play in the Vegas tournament last month. You didn't play on our court. We didn't play against you, but I saw you playing. I want you on my team." And now you have these bids from all these teams, and you're feeling special. You're being recruited basically. It's also a good feeling. You feel wanted. So now when you show up on a team, there's a spot on the roster that is designed for you. Maybe you're a lights out shooter, or maybe you're the fastest kid, and they say, "We're going to go to these different states. We're going to play these games. I want you on my team." You feel good. These are all the good things that are coming out of club sports. And especially because these club sports coaches are being paid, you now have a club sports coach who wants to be there. They want to spend time with your child. They want to see your child improve. They have to. Why? Because they're being paid for it. And if they're not putting up results, they get fired when it comes to these bigger organizations, right? So they got to be productive, and that's all great for your kids. So I support that. Now here come the cons. The cons are things that aren't too good. Now we're looking at, you have too many options. Way too many options. And what happens with too many options is now you have kids that are playing for, again, multiple teams. Because one team is great for learning, one team may travel all the time. Now you're training too much. Maybe you have too many options, as in, you know what? I don't know which team to pick. I'm going to go with the team that plays me. Well, that's not good, because maybe the other team is putting adversity in your face for you to improve, because the things you're lacking to move to the next level is exactly what you need and what they're putting in front of you. Maybe you need to learn how to come off the bench. Maybe you need to learn how to sit down and be a follower for a second. Maybe you need to learn, how to find your ability and role within a structure. But what happens is, now you just bounce teams and you move around. You know what? My son isn't playing. I'm out of here. You're harming your child when it comes to that specific context, right? Typically, the decisions are made by the parents. They're voiced by the children. Then it's not good. Then what this does is it creates and builds this lack of loyalty. It creates and builds this lack of consistency. So now you're dealing with these athletes that the second they don't like something, they leave. Right? Workouts too hard, I leave. Running way too much, I leave. The coach yells too much. I want someone to love me and hold me. I'm leaving. Because the other coach called me the other day and he wants me to be the greatest, but you have me as a backup. It's not good when you leave. These levels of adversity are needed, and a lot of these kids are not getting them, and they leave immediately. But this also goes consistent with poor quality of coaching. Before, if you wanted a great coach, there were only a handful out there. Only a handful of great coaches, only a handful of great teams out there. And because there's only so few teams, you find those teams and you're grateful to make that team. And you're grateful to sit there on the bench knowing that one day you're going to play. Knowing that you're going to wait and do the best you can to get to that point to where you can play. But again, with the cons, because any person can just make a team. There's a tournament in Vegas. It's $50 or $500 to enroll. Let's say I have a son and my son is, in my eyes, the greatest thing ever, and that son wouldn't play for any team. I decide to get a team that's not good. That's not as good as my kid, even though my kid isn't that good. And now my kid is the best kid on the team, and now we need him to play every second on the clock. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just there. Now, these coaches are out there. And the issue is that coach may be great at recruiting. All of a sudden, your child's on that team, and now you're on it. That's not helping your child get the best benefit and the best exposure and resources to help your kid become that much better for the future. So, again, there are a lot of pros and cons on it. We can go, or I could go on this on and on for days. You got to figure out what's the balance, right? So here's an example. I'll leave his name out. I don't think it's really too important, but I might have used this example before, but I'm going to use it again because it's a really good example. There's an athlete that plays for this football team and decided to transfer schools mainly because he wanted more playing time. He wanted more touches, and he played football. He wanted more touches, wanted more reps, and his position happened to be running back. All this means is when you're a running back, in order for you to be stopped, you have to be hit and tackled. As you're running back, you're literally hit every single time. There aren't many times your running back gets the ball and is able to run out of bounds. They're hit every single time. A quarterback may take 20 snaps in a game, have 20 throws or whatever, and not get hit one time. If they do, it's, not a flat out hit to the face. It's not a person that's bigger, stronger. It just depends on what you're doing. Receiver, same thing. You might get hit or you're out of bounds or whatever else. But he decides to transfer because he wants more reps. He's getting hit more often. And so all this is doing is wearing down his ability and his ability to produce, right? Every single time this athlete gets hit, he's taking a toll on his body, and it's depreciating his actual value. However, every touch he has that he does well, it increases his value. So my thing would be, I'd want to have the best touches, the best opportunity to get the best to promote myself versus just wearing myself down. Now, what this ties into is the too many options. The fact that he went from a team that showcased his ability, they gave him the ball every time. He is a phenomenal athlete. He deserved all those things. But now I want the best athlete to have the ball whenever I need that athlete to run the ball only 4 times in a game. I'm going to give you the ball 4 times. I know you can average 10 yards a carry, go to work. But when you can average 10 yards a carry, but only for 5 or 6 runs a game, but I'm giving you the ball 40 times, it's not going to help in the end. It's going to make things worse. You're not as fresh, especially in the sport of football, right? So moving on is you have the awards, that are given to the best athletes, right? So let's just say your kid is in a very, very competitive league. They're in a very competitive club team, and they receive the highest accolades. They get MVP, all these things. That's great. They also have accolades for the little schools, the ones that aren't as competitive, the teams that aren't as good. They're still a best player, all these things. Parents come to these teams with their kid's resume and say, my kid was the AYSO MVP. Well, that's great. The AYSO MVP is perfect. However, the AYSO MVP does not make our team. Our team is way more competitive. Let's move over to track. With track and field, all the time I hear my kid was the whatever champion. They were 5-time league champion. They did all this stuff, all these accolades. They were the best in their school. They would run and they would blow all the kids out in the hurdle race. They were just way too good. That's great. But then you hop on my team and they're dead last. Or they have no idea what they're doing. Or just the competition level is just so much better that it just poops on all of your successes. For me, it's, are you California good? Because if you're great in California, we know that track and field produces the most track and field Olympic athletes in the nation. So if you're good in this area, you're good anywhere. Are you good in the state? Are you good in the nation? Those should be things you're aspiring towards. Now, you always want to celebrate your awards. If you're MVP, if you're player of the game, player of the week, those are always good. Celebrate those things. But that doesn't mean your athlete is good. It just means your athlete has accomplished things. Keep that into understanding that that helps them celebrate the many milestones to get better and improve. But when it comes to team sports, you got to be in that top 1%. You got to be good. And so that's where organizing your own season, understanding what you're doing is important because you got to improve and get better. When are you improving and getting better? If you're playing in your sport every single day, every single calendar part of the year, and you're not focusing and working on improving your foot speed, improving your strength, putting the ball down for a second, and just getting stronger and mentally stronger, then you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage because these top tier athletes are not just physically capable, they're smart. They understand it, they get it. They have a high sports IQ, they're healthy, they're rested, all these things are in play, and it's very important to understand that. So City Good and California Great are two different ballparks, two different stadiums, two different worlds. The goal is we're good now. Let's keep focusing on it. My kid wants to go pro. If you want to go pro in any sport, you need to be California Great. All right. Then the last thing is I kind of touched it already with, just being pulled into multiple sports. If you're doing multiple sports, great. The cross training for it is great. However, you got to sit down and think about what's your primary sport. Whatever your primary sport is, you always want to shift things around to help out your primary sport. If you're always doing a sport, then it's good. But if your goal is to go pro, make sure that you plan things around your primary sport when it comes to training, the calendar year, active rest. These things are important. Now, the next part is social media impact. How does social media have impact on, these athletes to making them spoiled? I call it a synthetic life. What I mean by that is synthetic is just a fabricated version of what reality is, right? So let's say you go on Instagram and you see an athlete's highlight tape, right? The highlight tape literally only shows the highlights. It's all the made baskets. It's all the times that an athlete did some great things. Well, I want to see the bad stuff. We don't show the lowlights. But the issue is when you have these kids that are born into social media, which is the generation that's being born now, the 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, they were born in this world with a phone in their hand or a computer or an iPad in their hand, and all they see is the highlights. And so they just assume that that person is an all-star, not knowing that they spend 8 hours a day training. They spend all these hours developing and getting better, studying film. They just think that that's what life is, and it's not. you know. So now we have these athletes that put together this highlight tape and they think they're just the greatest thing ever. And it's like, no, you're good versus your competition. Keep that up. You're doing great because your competition you're going against, you're killing it. Now let's challenge you and see what's next. They don't see the process that it took to get to that point. They just see the highlights. So now, even from there, you have kids now that are watching videos and they're saying, oh, well, this school had a highlight tape that was edited great. They look like a good team. Or if this team has beautiful jerseys, their Instagram page has 100,000 followers, I want to be a part of that team versus the team that has 2 followers, because that team's focus is to get better and develop character. They may not have the best jerseys, but it's the development of character that's helping the athletes develop and go and do more. Many times you have these teams that just flaunt and showcase the athletes that come into their school or whatever. But I'm looking at, when an athlete comes in as a great athlete, do they leave as the greatest ever? If an athlete comes in as a good athlete, are they leaving as a great athlete? I want to see those programs. I want to see those things. But the issue is these kids thumbing through social media, they don't know this. They don't understand it. They just see the colors and the jerseys and all these loud things, and they want to be a part of those fun things versus being a part of just general development of success. So it's very important that you as a parent, you as a coach, whoever's listening, break down and teach these athletes the value of what they're doing, where they're going. And that's where it's very important that you speak with a professional before making a decision for your child. This is now in the solutions part. Speak to professionals. Don't speak to your friend who played, college football and that's all they did. Speak to a person who is a professional in this field with getting athletes from point A to point B. I happen to be very knowledgeable, so you can always reach out to me, or if I don't know, I will pass you on to someone that I feel does. When it comes to college recruiting, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. So I would then reference you to the athletes or the people that know all the ins and outs with the clearinghouse. If you're looking about or talking about scheduling, how do I schedule my athletes' season? They're a soccer player, but we play all the time. We have 4 teams and they play basketball. It's very important that you understand that you need to organize your athlete's calendar, and the best way to do it is by speaking with a professional, not just a person who just knows a couple things. You also want to look into a sports psychologist. It's not that it's a bad thing, it's actually a good thing, but you want to know where you are mentally as a parent and also know where your athlete is as an athlete, as a kid. Because many times moving these kids back and forth from teams, maybe they go to a team but they're just not ready for it yet, or maybe they do a tryout and the team isn't ready for them. Maybe they're just not good enough. Well, they may have a situation mentally where they just don't feel good enough. Or maybe they say, you know what, I'm supposed to be good, and maybe they're too cocky and they got to get bumped down a little bit. We got to evaluate where these kids are mentally. And these things are very important to look at. We just saw an article recently with Kevin Love talking about his issue with mental stability. Who else just came out with it? Derrick Rose came out with something talking about, I guess he was dealing with depression and whatever else. So like these things are finally coming out. So it's very important that you understand that even if they don't show it, they don't know it, there's going to be a time where they are going to have to deal with adversity. If you're not teaching them how to deal with it, you're going to have to figure out someone who can. Okay. Now, the last thing to kind of sum this up is you got to manage your child with the best interest of your child. And many times you might need a board of advisors. If you're managing your child, you need management. You need advisors. You need a group of people that understand the process. And then when you do make these choices, you make these choices based on management, based on the best interest of your athlete versus just making an emotional decision. I was yanked out of flag football because my grades were bad. That was my mom's decision, right? Which is good. It was a good thing. However, what if it was a bad thing? Because when she yanked me out, she would go to work. I was at home by myself. So the good thing was she pulled me out. She pulled me out of the sport because there was a value to school. However, now I was at home with no tutors, just by myself, wasn't doing homework. I was just playing video games because I had no one to tell me what to do. But I had that direction when I was at football. Maybe she yanks me out of the sport and I can't play, but I got to go to practice. I got to sit there on the sidelines and watch these kids play. And now I'm maybe learning more ins and outs of the game while I'm, realizing that I messed up somewhere. Could that be help towards my development? Maybe it could have, maybe it couldn't. I don't know. But again, having your board of advisors, this could have been talked out. And so that is a way to help. Maybe it's multiple parents, again, your professionals. All these things need to be in play to help your child be the best possible. I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully, spoiled athletes helped. The topic itself, I feel that it's something that needs to be talked about. Some people may feel like it's not me, but it's okay. If you enjoy these podcasts, please click that donate button. You can see that in the link below. I believe if you're on YouTube, the link's going to be there. If you're on the app, you can go ahead and click those things. If you don't have the app, I'd rather you guys watch or listen to the podcast through the app, because you can turn your phone on sleep mode and it still plays. If you're on YouTube and you're listening to it, you got to keep the screen open. But download the app. I put more things on there. Again, I'm getting more interactive with it. I'm finding new ways to do a lot more things. And yeah, if you're looking for these services when it comes down to professional opinions, when it comes down to the psych, the mental state of your athletes, it's very important to contact someone. If it's me or anyone else, reach out. I can give you some information, some numbers. If you're an athlete that's looking to get into college, or if your athlete just finished college and you're trying to go pro, I have a lot of resources for you, a lot of directions, and I can be a help for you. So thanks for listening. I will see you guys next time.